Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. I was never really a superstitious person or someone who believed in ghosts or creepy stuff, but what happened to me one night during my senior year of high school still sends shivers down my spine. At the time, I was working as a DoorDash delivery driver to earn some extra money. I had a pretty flexible schedule, which allowed me to work around my classes, homework, and other responsibilities. But sometimes, especially on weekends, I would push myself to work early hours to earn more cash. I guess I was just your typical high school student trying to save up for college and money for rent. It was a Friday night, and I had already been driving around for several hours, delivering food to hungry customers all over town. I had made quite a few deliveries, and by the time the clock struck 11 p.m., I was feeling pretty worn out. I was just about to call it a night when I received one last order on my phone. It was for some Chinese food to be delivered to a bungalow in a part of town that I wasn't too familiar with. I hesitated for a moment, then I figured that one more delivery couldn't hurt. I had no idea just how wrong I was. The order was pretty straightforward, a couple of dishes and a large soda. I picked up the food from the Chinese restaurant and headed towards the customer's address. As I got closer, the neighborhood started to look a bit sketchy. The houses were old and rundown with overgrown yards and broken windows. The streetlights were few and far between, casting eerie shadows onto the crumbling sidewalks. I remember feeling a little uneasy, but I pushed those thoughts aside, reminding myself that I was almost done for the night. I finally arrived at the bungalow, which was just as rundown as the other houses in the area. I parked my car at the curb and grabbed the bag of food, double-checking the order to make sure everything was in there. That's when I realized that the restaurant had forgotten the customer's soda. I debated whether to call the customer and apologize, but ultimately decided that I would just explain the situation when I delivered the food. I walked up to the front door, feeling a growing sense of unease as I approached. The house was dark and appeared to be empty, but there was an overpowering stench of mold and decay in the air. I knocked on the door a few times, but there was no response. I was about to call the customer when the door suddenly creaked open, revealing a man who looked like he had slept in days. His eyes were bloodshot and wild, and he had a crazed expression on his face. In one hand, he held the door open, and in the other he gripped a gun. I was paralyzed with fear as the man stared at me, his eyes darting from the bag of food in my hand to the empty spot where the soda should have been. He started yelling something about the missing drink, his voice becoming more and more agitated with each word. I tried to explain that it was the restaurant's mistake and that I was just the delivery driver, but my words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The man's grip on the gun tightened, and he began to wave it around erratically, making it clear that he was not in his right mind. My heart was pounding in my chest as I tried to figure out what to do. It felt like time had slowed down, and each second that passed seemed to stretch on for an eternity. I knew I had to get out of there, so I took a deep breath, mustered all my courage, and bolted back towards my car. The man chased after me, the gun still in his hand, yelling incomprehensible threats. As I ran, I could hear the sound of barking from somewhere in the darkness. My heart sank as I realized that he had let his dog loose to chase after me as well. I reached my car, adrenaline surging through my veins, and fumbled with my keys, desperately trying to unlock the door. I could hear the dog closing in, its growls growing louder with each passing second. Finally, I managed to get the door open and threw myself inside, slamming it shut just as the dog lunged towards the car, its teeth bared and snapping in frustration. I started the car and flew to the gas, speeding away from the house as fast as I could. I could see the man in the rearview mirror, still holding the gun and screaming after me. My hands shook on the steering wheel, and my breath came in ragged gasps as I tried to process what had just happened. The terror I felt was indescribable, and I couldn't stop shaking even after I had put a significant distance between myself and the bungalow. Once I had calmed down enough to think clearly, I called the police to report the incident. It took my statement, and I later learned that the man had a history of mental illness and drug abuse. He was eventually arrested, but that didn't do much to soothe my nerves. I quit my job at DoorDash shortly after that night, realizing that no amount of money was worth the risk I had taken. For a long time after that experience, I had nightmares about the man and his dog, their eyes burning with rage as they chased me through the darkness. I know it might sound silly, but I started carrying pepper spray with me wherever I went, just in case. I also took up self-defense classes, determined to never feel so helpless and terrified again. The memory of that night still haunts me, and I can't help but think about all the things that could have gone wrong. If I hadn't been able to unlock my car in time, or if the man had been a better shot, things might have ended very differently for me. I'll never forget the lesson I learned that night. Sometimes it's better to trust your gut and call it a night, even if it means missing out on a little extra cash. I never thought I'd have a story like this to share, but life can be full of surprises, both good and bad. It all started when I took a weekend job as an Uber Eats delivery cyclist to save up for the new PlayStation. I was in my senior year of high school, and I wanted to make some extra money without sacrificing too much of my free time. Little did I know, one of my deliveries would turn into a night I'd never forget. It was a typical Saturday evening, and I was riding my bike around town, dropping off food to hungry customers. I was pretty familiar with most of the area, but that night I found myself in a neighborhood that I didn't know very well. The streets were narrow, and the houses seemed to be huddled together, their shadows looming over me as I pedaled through the dimly lit streets. Everything was going smoothly until my bike suddenly hit a deep pothole, causing one of the tires to go flat. I cursed under my breath, realizing that I still had a few more deliveries to make before I could call it a night. I tried to keep riding, but the flat tire made it nearly impossible to maintain any decent speed. I was forced to slow down and push my bike along the sidewalk, hoping that I could still make the rest of my deliveries on time. As I struggled with my bike, I noticed a figure approaching me from one of the nearby houses. I couldn't see their face very well, but they appeared to be around my age. They claimed to be the customer waiting for the delivery I was carrying, but something about the situation felt off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but my gut told me that this person was lying. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do, when the stranger suddenly lunged towards me and snatched the bag of food from my hands. I was stunned by the sudden turn of events, my heart pounding in my chest as the stranger sprinted away with the stolen meal. My mind raced, trying to figure out how to handle the situation. I knew I couldn't just let the thief get away, but with my bike in its current state, I wasn't sure how I'd be able to catch up to them. Despite the flat tire, I made the decision to hop back on my bike and give chase, pedaling as hard as I could. Riding on a flat tire was no easy task, but adrenaline and sheer determination fueled my pursuit. The stranger seemed to realize that I was gaining on them, and they began to run even faster, weaving in and out of alleyways and side streets in an attempt to lose me. I knew that I couldn't keep up this pace for much longer, but I refused to give up. I needed that PlayStation 5, and I wasn't about to let some random thief ruin my chances of getting it. The chase continued for what felt like an eternity, but in reality, it couldn't have been more than a few minutes. I was exhausted, my legs burning from the effort of pedaling with a flat tire, but I knew I couldn't afford to slow down. The thief was starting to tire as well, their pace slowing as they glanced back at me in desperation. Finally, I saw my chance. The stranger stumbled, and for a brief moment their grip on the bag of food loosened. I put every ounce of energy I had left into one final burst of speed, lunging forward and snatching the bag back from their grasp. The thief seemed too shocked to react, and I seized the opportunity to turn my bike around and pedal away as fast as I could, my heart racing in my chest. I managed to put some distance between myself and the thief, who eventually gave up on trying to catch me again. I continued riding, pushing my bike as fast as it would go with a flat tire, desperate to get away from that neighborhood and back to familiar territory. My entire body was aching from the effort, and my breath came in ragged gasps, but I couldn't afford to stop and rest. Eventually, I made it to the customer's actual address, my hands trembling as I handed over the slightly disheveled bag of food. I quickly explained what had happened, and the customer seemed both shocked and sympathetic. They thanked me for going above and beyond to make sure they got their order, and he even gave me a generous tip for my troubles. With the delivery finally completed, I took a moment to catch my breath and assess the damage to my bike. The tire was completely ruined, and I knew I wouldn't be able to make any more deliveries that night. Disheartened but still determined, I decided to call it a day and began the long, slow walk back home, pushing my broken bike alongside me. That night, as I lay in bed, replaying the events in my head, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. I was angry at the thief for putting me in such a dangerous situation, but I was also proud of myself for standing up to them and getting the food back. I knew that I had put myself at risk, but in the end, it had been worth it. The following day, I took my bike to a repair shop, and while it cost me a pretty penny to get it fixed, I knew it was a small price to pay for my safety and the satisfaction of a job well done. And as for the game console, well, it took me a little longer to save up for it than I had originally planned, but when I finally got my hands on it, it felt like a well-earned reward for everything I had been through. That night changed my perspective on my weekend jog, and the challenges that can arise when you least expect them. It taught me the importance of trusting my instincts and staying vigilant, even in seemingly ordinary situations. I'll never forget the adrenaline rush of that chase, and the feeling of triumph when I managed to retrieve the stolen food. It's a story I'll tell for years to come, a testament to the power of perseverance and the unexpected adventures that life can throw your way. When I was 16, I had no idea that a simple part-time job could be the source of such an unnerving experience. Like many teenagers, I was looking for a way to earn some extra cash, so I decided to join a local pizza delivery company called Yard Sale Pizza. Having recently moved to the area with my family, I was still learning my way around and familiarizing myself with the local neighborhoods. As a result, I had to rely heavily on my phone's GPS to get me to my destinations. The job was pretty straightforward, and I enjoyed the feeling of independence that came with cycling around town, delivering pizzas to hungry customers. I was getting to know the area more and more with each delivery, and I felt proud to be making my own money for the first time. On a Friday night, the pizza shop was bustling with activity. The phone rang off the hook with orders, and the kitchen was a blur of cooks and pizza boxes as they tried to keep up with the demand. I had been cycling around town, delivering pizzas for several hours, and I was looking forward to wrapping up my shift and heading home. As the evening wore on, I received an order for a large pizza to be delivered to a house in a small cul-de-sac on the outskirts of town. I wasn't familiar with that particular neighborhood, but I trusted my GPS to guide me there without any issues. As I set off on my bike, I had a funny feeling that something was different about this delivery, but I'd brushed it off as simple nervousness about being in an unfamiliar area. The ride took me through some winding roads and past houses that became increasingly spaced out as I ventured further from the center of town. The area was quiet, with only the occasional barking of a dog or the distant hum of a passing car breaking the silence. As I approached the cul-de-sac, I'd noticed that the streetlights were sparse, casting eerie shadows across the road. The houses in the cul-de-sac were hidden behind tall trees and hedges, giving the whole area a secluded, almost secretive feel. I parked my bike at the entrance and proceeded on foot, using my phone's flashlight to help me navigate the dark, uneven path to the customer's house. The air felt heavy, as though I was being watched, but I tried to ignore the feeling and focus on the task at hand. When I finally arrived at the address, I was greeted by a large, two-story house with a porch that was shrouded in darkness. I cautiously climbed the porch steps, gripping the pizza box tightly in my hand, and rang the doorbell. The sound echoed through the house, but there was no response. I waited a few moments, then rang the doorbell again, followed by knocking on the door. Still, no one came to answer. I pulled out my phone to call the customer, hoping that maybe they just hadn't heard the doorbell. As I dialed the number and pressed the phone to my ear, I'd noticed something out of the corner of my eye that made my heart skip a beat. At the far end of the cul-de-sac, partially hidden in the shadows, was a group of people. It was difficult to make out their faces in the darkness, but it was clear that they were all holding baseball bats. They didn't seem to be doing anything. They were just standing there staring at me. The sight sent a shiver down my spine, and a somewhat edgy feeling fell upon me. The customer's phone went to voicemail, so I hung up and sent them a text message, explaining that I was at their door with a pizza. My eyes kept darting back to the group in the shadows, who remained motionless and silent, their presence growing more unnerving by the second. I couldn't understand why they were just standing there with baseball bats, and my mind raced with possibilities, none of which were comforting. After waiting for what felt like an eternity, I still hadn't received a response from the customer. I considered leaving the pizza on the doorstep, but the thought of that eerie group in the shadows made me think twice. I didn't want to leave the safety of the porch, but I also didn't want to stay there, trapped between the unresponsive house and the silent group of strangers. Finally, I mustered up the courage to step off the porch and make my way back to my bike, all the while keeping a watchful eye on the group. They didn't move, but I could feel their eyes following me as I hurried down the path and reached my bike. With my heart pounding in my chest, I mounted my bike and began pedaling as fast as I could, desperate to leave the cul-de-sac and the chilling presence of the strangers behind me. As I sped away, I couldn't help but glance back over my shoulder, only to see the group still standing there, watching me leave. My breath came in ragged gasps as I pushed my legs to their limit, trying to put as much distance as possible between myself and the cul-de-sac. The feeling of being watched stayed with me like a dark cloud hanging over my head as I made my way back to the pizza shop. When I finally arrived, I burst through the door, my heart pounding in my chest, and quickly explained the situation to my manager. They listened intently, concern furrowing their brow, and reassured me that I had done the right thing by leaving. They promised to contact the customer and try to sort things out, but I couldn't help but feel shaken by the encounter. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.